He walked into my life disguised as fortune itself, a man whose charm seemed woven out of silk and whose words fell like coins from a bottomless purse. I had been weary then, tired of disappointments that came one after another, and when he appeared, I wanted to believe fate had finally delivered me a chance. He looked me straight in the eyes, and there was something in the steadiness of his gaze that made me surrender my doubts. A man like him, I thought, couldn't possibly be false. How wrong I was. From the very beginning, he built his foundation not on truth, but on carefully arranged lies. He spoke of ventures that promised riches, of opportunities that came once in a lifetime, and of loyalty, friendship, even love, as though he were the keeper of all three. I wanted to believe him. He studied me, learned my weaknesses, discovered my dreams, and tailored his lies to fit them perfectly. Slowly, he became indispensable. When he asked me to trust him, it didn't feel like a request. It felt like the most natural decision in the world. At first, the losses were small, so small I ignored them. A little money here, a favor there, a signature on a document I barely read. He told me it was routine, that we were building something great together. My doubts flickered now and then, but his presence extinguished them before they could burn. He had a way of making you feel foolish for questioning him, as though your hesitation were the only obstacle in the path of greatness. And so I silenced my instincts, let him guide me, and smiled at the dream he dangled before me. By the time I realized the truth, it was too late. My savings were gone, siphoned away into accounts I could not trace. The business we were supposed to build never existed. The contracts I had signed tied me to debts I had never taken, debts now demanding repayment. My name, once clean, became stained with ruin. I remember the day the final notice arrived, threats of court, of seizure, of destruction of everything I still had left. He was nowhere to be found. He had disappeared, leaving only the wreckage of my life behind. I lost my home. Friends withdrew, wary of the scandal attached to me. Family offered pity, but not help. I was left hollow, stripped bare by a man who had smiled at me while robbing me blind. The nights stretched endlessly, each one colder than the last, and in the silence of those hours, a thought began to take root. It was not despair, nor the fragile hope that he might return to undo the damage. It was something sharper, harder. It was the slow, steady birth of revenge. Finding him was not easy, but men like him always leave traces. The arrogant believe themselves clever, too clever to ever truly cover their tracks. I became a hunter, piecing together fragments of information, following whispers of his name through bars, offices, and street corners. Months passed, and with each clue I gathered, I shed the remnants of who I had been. No longer the naive believer, I became someone patient, calculating, ruthless in pursuit. When I finally saw him again, it was in a city far from where I had fallen, where he was living under another name, wearing the same charm, spinning the same lies. He had new victims lined up, faces as eager as mine had once been. For a moment, watching him, rage nearly consumed me, but I did not act. Not then. Revenge demanded precision, not impulse. I smiled instead, a smile he did not recognize, and let him believe he had never seen me before. I wove my way into his new circle, mirrored his tricks, and let him believe I was another fool. But this time, I was the one holding the strings. Piece by piece, I dismantled the illusion he had built. I fed him information that led him into traps, introduced him to opportunities that turned to quicksand, and carefully, methodically, began stripping him of his own gains. It was not money I wanted, though I took it back where I could. It was the sight of fear dawning in his eyes when he realized the walls were closing in. And then came the final blow. I exposed him to the very people he had sought to deceive. Papers, proof, testimonies, all of it delivered into the hands of those who had once trusted him. His empire crumbled overnight. His allies turned to enemies, his escape routes sealed. I made sure his name was dragged through the same mud he had buried me in, only deeper, until there was nowhere left for him to crawl. The last time I saw him, he wasn't the man of confidence and silk I once knew. He was cornered, desperate, a shadow of the predator who had taken everything from me. He begged, pleaded, tried to summon the charm that had fooled me once, but it rang hollow now. I had no mercy left to give. Watching him fall was not joy, it was justice, raw and cold, but it burned brighter than any dream he had once sold me. In the end, I reclaimed what he stole, though not in the way I had once hoped. Some losses cannot be undone. But I had taken something from him that was far greater than wealth, his power, his mask, the illusion that had carried him through life. I left him in ruins, as he had left me, and as I walked away, I carried with me the one thing he could never steal again, my strength, sharpened by betrayal, forged in vengeance. He was the classic cheat who cost me everything. But in the end, I was the one who wrote the final chapter. The first time I saw him broken, I thought it would be enough. I thought exposing him, destroying his lies, and making him taste the same humiliation he once fed me would fill the emptiness he carved into my life. But revenge is a hunger that never truly stops once you begin to feed it. The sight of him trembling, stripped of his riches, no longer worshipped by the gullible crowd he always gathered, it satisfied me for a while. Yet deep inside, a whisper told me it wasn't enough. He had taken years from me, stolen trust one would never again offer freely, scarred me in ways no amount of repayment could heal. Watching him fall into disgrace was justice. Watching him suffer was revenge. But I wanted him to know what it truly meant to lose everything. So I stayed close, hidden in plain sight, like a ghost. He didn't know it was me behind the whispers that followed him wherever he went, the rumors that spread just as he tried to rebuild himself under another name. Each time he tried to claw his way back, I was there in the shadows, tipping the balance, ensuring he failed. Opportunities slipped through his fingers. Friends abandoned him. Investors walked away at the last moment, spooked by secrets they were never supposed to know. I was the invisible hand pushing him deeper into the pit. Soon, he had nothing left but desperation. I watched him sell off what little remained, move from city to city, wearing down his charm on smaller, hungrier crowds who cared less for his charisma and more for his dwindling purse. The man who once had the world in his grip now looked over his shoulder at every corner, flinched at every unexpected sound. He was paranoid, and rightly so, though he never knew the shape of the ghost that haunted him. One night, I decided it was time to reveal myself, not to gloat, but to burn the final image of me into his memory. I waited in the seediest bar I knew, a place where he now scraped for survival, trying to sell lies to drunks who barely listened. He didn't recognize me at first. My clothes were simple, my demeanor calm, and he had grown used to seeing only enemies where once there had been allies. But when I sat across from him and spoke his real name, his first name, the one he hadn't used in years, his face drained of color. He stammered, tried to laugh it off, but I leaned in and whispered the words he once said to me on the day I lost everything. Trust me. It's all going to work out. The look in his eyes then, fear, regret, disbelief, was worth more than all the money he had ever stolen. He realized in that instant that I had been the one pulling his life apart thread by thread, that his ruin wasn't bad luck but deliberate, calculated justice. I didn't touch him. I didn't need to. The knowledge itself was the punishment. He knew that as long as I breathed, he would never rebuild, never rise again, because I would always be there, waiting, watching, ready to strike. I left him trembling in that bar, a man gutted not by violence, but by the slow, merciless destruction of everything he once was. And yet, even as I walked away, I knew something had changed in me too. Revenge had remade me. The innocence I once had was long gone, buried with the ruins of my past. What replaced it was harder, colder, sharper. I wasn't the victim anymore. I had become something else entirely, someone who had learned to wield the same ruthlessness he once used, but with purpose instead of greed. He was the classic cheat who thought he could cost me everything and walk away untouched. But I cost him more. I cost him his freedom, his future, his peace of mind. And in the end, I became his shadow, the one lesson he could never escape. Revenge gave me back my life, but it also changed the shape of who I was. When I destroyed him, I thought that would be the end. That the hunger would quiet, that justice would settle like a stone, and let me breathe again. But what no one ever tells you is that once you learn to be merciless, once you sharpen yourself into a weapon, it doesn't simply end when your first target falls. I carried his ruin like a trophy at first, proud of the precision with which I had undone him. Yet in the silence afterward, I caught myself replaying the steps I had taken, the whispers, the lies, the manipulation, the shadows in which I moved. They weren't his tricks anymore. They were mine. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized I had become what I once hated. Not a victim. Not even just a survivor. Something far more dangerous. In the weeks after his final collapse, I kept hearing about others like him, men and women who built their lives on deception, who fed on trust and left nothing but wreckage behind. Once, I would have pitted their victims and turned away, telling myself it wasn't my fight. But not anymore. I had learned too well what it meant to be powerless, and I had learned even better how to turn that power back on those who abused it. The first one I went after wasn't even connected to him. She was a different kind of predator, a woman who preyed on the desperate, promising them jobs abroad only to leave them stranded and broken. I studied her like I had studied him, watched the patterns of her life, her weaknesses, her lies. And then, piece by piece, I did to her what I had done to him. I didn't even need to fabricate anything. The truth was poison enough once I dragged it into the light. By the time I was finished, she was ruined, just like him. And that was when I realized something I had never dared admit to myself. It wasn't just revenge anymore. It was a calling, a part of me that had awakened and refused to be buried again. But it came with a cost. The more I embraced this path, the less of my old self remained. I no longer trusted easily, spoke less, smiled even less. People who once cared for me said I seemed distant, colder, as though I had built walls too high to ever climb again. They weren't wrong. I had seen what trust could do, how easily it could be weaponized, and I would never allow myself to be that unguarded again. Sometimes late at night, I would think of him, the man who cost me everything. I would wonder if he was still alive somewhere, broken, drifting, looking over his shoulder. I hoped he was. I hoped he woke every morning with dread, knowing I might still be out there watching, waiting. That was his eternal punishment, never knowing when the next strike might fall. But here is the truth I never speak aloud. I no longer needed him. He was just the beginning. Every time I found another cheat, another liar who thrived on ruining lives, I felt that same sharp satisfaction, that same justice burning through me. I had become the shadow they all feared, the one no lie could escape. Still, sometimes I asked myself, what had I become? Was I still the wronged one seeking balance, or had I crossed into something darker, something that no longer cared about justice, only the thrill of the hunt? I could no longer tell the difference. Perhaps it didn't matter. He was the classic cheat who cost me everything. And because of him, I had been reborn, not as his victim, not as his equal, but as something far worse. His ruin was my revenge, but his legacy was the monster he created in me. And monsters, once awakened, do not go back to sleep.